Welcome to Mystara for what became the video from hell, as nothing went right with this production. The Armory of Mystara. There's a lot of weapons unique to the various regions. While some weapons would be considered commonplace because of the real-world allegories, you aren't going to find them outside of a handful or even a single nation. We've got some obscure weapons, some absolutely made-up insane weapons, and a few race-specific magical ones. I'm Mr. Welch, and remember, the pointy end goes into the other guy. I'm only talking about weapons introduced in later books, not the ones in the core rulebook, unless they're called out for various reasons. There's long swords everywhere. I'm not going to compare an Auslandic longsword to a Yusudrian longsword. It's the same weapon. Karamikos and Ethangar heavily use the Cavalry saber, but I need something special just to give the history of the weapon. Now, the Elven longsword is inherently magical and super special, because elves. The various forms of spiky shields in the book are only mentioned as part of the Thiatian Gladiatorial culture. But enough explaining. It's time to draw steel. Heading to Alfheim first, and we have the aforementioned Elven longsword. It's pretty, made of magical wood, and better all the way around. Because elves. It's the size of a broadsword, as light as a short sword, and does 1d6 plus 1 damage, so even then it's right in the middle between the long and the short sword. It's created using the sap of a magical oak tree and crafted by elven smiths that serve the tree keepers. While it has no bonuses to hit or damage from the enchantment like a regular magical sword, it can hurt creatures that need magic weapons to do so. It counts as a +1 weapon in that regard, and can be further enchanted to actually have a to-hit bonus. It also has a permanent detect danger spell, so it glows if the wielder is in danger. Anyone can hold it, but it will make you feel ill if you hate elves. I recommend Dramamine. The elven arrow is made from the limbs of the Tree of Life, with its stone arrowheads being dipped in the tree's sap. These are relatively rare, as the smiths can only make about a dozen a year. Their first bonus is their hardness. Rather than the 50% chance of being lost when fired, an elven arrow has a 90% chance of recovery. Like the sword, they count as magical, but without any actual bonuses. They are status symbols. The more arrows an elf carries, the higher the regard the tree keepers hold him in. Skipping over to the 5 Shires for the next bit of racial weaponry. The dwarves do have their racial weapons, but where the other races measure their weapons in inches, the dwarves prefer to measure their weapons in millimeters. So the Hen get the next round, and their first weapon is the Black Sling, a magical sling created by the Black Flame Crucible. This +3 sling has no damage bonus and keeps its ammunition in an extra dimensional space in the sling's pocket. The Hen using it can choose which bit of ammunition is used for each attack. They have created various forms of ammunition and alchemical formulas encased in a glass shell, such as sleeping powders, itching powders, and bits of black pudding. They can also store small objects like keys or gems in the sling. If a Hen can hold the thing in his fist, it can be stored in the Black Sling. The Sword of Black Flame is a short sword-length rapier which is comprised of a black metal-like substance. It's a +4 magical weapon, and finally a demi-human weapon that actually gets a real damage bonus. It can parry magical spells and attacks once per round. If your wizard is facing down an angry halfling with a black steel letter opener, think real hard about what spell you're going to use so you don't eat your own finger of death. And don't get smart and think you can carpet bomb the cute little murder hobo. The Sword of Black Flame can also reflect AoE spells, and when it does that, it reduces the area of effect to just the size of you. It can also create a magical silence within a 20-foot radius, so don't worry too much about casting spells up close. The best part, the Hen can leave the silence effect behind and do it up to 4 times separately. That's a nasty little bit of cutlery the Hen have for themselves. Lastly, we have the Dagger of Black Flame, or the Firefighter's Dream for the Hen. This +2 little stabby thing has the magical ability to put out a fire. All fire. Any fire. Every bit of fire in a 10-foot square area. Just out. If it's continual, it will reignite in a few minutes, but the area will remain fire-free until then. And I do mean all sorts of fire. This thing will put out lava. Better yet, for every d6 of fire damage that the dagger absorbed, it can release it all back as an attack, though it's all or nothing. The damage is typically 1d6 for every non-magical fire absorbed, and 2d6 for every source of magical fire absorbed. The gnomes have a lot of artillery-sized weapons they can call their own, but one weapon from their past stands out. The repeating crossbow. This was created in the lost nation of Falun and was crafted from a strange resin fiber material. The material was created by treating bits of giant fungus with an alchemical solution which hardened the resin to weapons' great strength. It's not a magical weapon like other demi-human weapons, though it can be enchanted. It acts like a heavy crossbow with an automatic reloading mechanism. Fire 6 shots, eject the ammunition box, and reload a new one. The act of reloading rewinds the loading mechanism, and you can start all over again. To get one of these, you will have to travel to the caves of Falun and recover one. Good luck. Kobolds guard them, and most of them are covered in limestone. The Ethangar have a lot of specialized weapons for fighting on horseback. Some of them are patently better than everyone else's version of the same weapon. The Ethangar lance is a regular lance, but has a hook to help dismount opponents. On a critical hit, or just rolling 5 over what you needed to hit, causes the opponent to be dismounted, or if they're on foot, to be knocked down. They can avoid this with a successful skill test, but if you're playing a knight, go grab an Ethangar lance, because they're just better. They also have a variety of specialist arrows for different opponents or circumstances. The Motaki, or light arrow, does 1d4 damage, but gets +2 to hit. The Takati, or heavy arrow, does 1d8 damage, but can't be fired at long range. They also have a flame arrow, used for setting the tall grasses on fire to flush out prey and enemies. They have a signal arrow, which communicates various messages to allies. These arrows are custom designed to make a specific noise as they whistle through the air. They can communicate anything from hold position, attack now, retreat, or extra large deep dish supreme, hold the mushrooms, add bacon. Of particular note for the Ethangar is their composite bow, which is the size of a short bow, but counts as a longbow in terms of range. Derrickan has one special weapon, and it's the rapier. This is your standard 1d6 -1 stabby stick, but it has a remarkable ability if you're trained in it. And by that, it means you have to go through a year of Derrickan military service. Once that's done, the rapier gets +2 to hit and gives you +2 to armor class because you're better than other fighters. This one was a bit controversial, not just because of the obvious year that every fighter did in their backstory for Derrickan's military for some reason, but because the rules for the weapon mastery had to be errated into the game later. Thiatian loves its weapons, unlike Alfheim, who thinks you should be happy with a long pointy stick. But the only new weapon that they introduce is the Cestus, a spiked boxing glove. They include the weapon mastery charts, though you'll only see these primarily used by gladiators. Their book mentions all of the weaponized shield variants, like the horn shield or the sword shield. These aren't unique to Thiatian, but they seem to be the only nation that uses them. Again, just in the fighting pits. Moving down to the Hollow World, you've got a massive selection of obscure weapons, though most of them fall into the regular sword, only bronze category, or stone, or obsidian, or other substances that isn't iron or steel, because most cultures there are Bronze Age or earlier. But for the sake of simplicity, they have the same rules as the superior steel weapons. The only weapon that stands out as new among the races of the core book is the Blacklore Torch, a laser blaster which does 1d8 damage with a short range of only 30 feet, and it doesn't work outside the land of the Blacklore Elves. It doesn't require ammunition, and players will be more than happy to grab one, at least until they step outside the region and find out that their toys need Wi-Fi to work correctly. While most Hollow World races are happy with just the regular weapons, then you get to the Nithians. The other two Hollow World nations that got their own book, the Millennians and the Askins, are content running around with spears and clubs. Not the Nithians. The Nithians have to be unique. They don't bother learning most regular weapons. No, they customize everything. They've probably got more unique weapons to their culture than everyone else in this video combined. Because Nithians. Of particular note, the Nithians tend to specialize in a single weapon, so most of their weapons have two stats. A generic one, and a specialized one, to make things even more difficult on players. To start, you've got the eye axes, which are axes on an S-shaped stick. They get their name from the fact that, due to their strange shaft, they resemble the symbol for the Nithian eye. Light versions do d4 damage, heavy versions do d6 damage. Characters can throw light versions, which is a common theme for Nithian weapons. The mace axe is a rounded mace head attached to an axe head. The weapon is only given out to the pharaoh for service and bravery. Any regular guy walking around with one of these has probably not gotten it legally, as being awarded a mace axe involves an automatic increase in social status. These do just d6 damage. The Kopish is your standard Egyptian sword. They come in one- or two-handed varieties. The damage is 1d4 for light and 1d6 for heavy unless you're trained. Then it's 2d4 and 1d10. Bit of a difference there. There's the staff sword, which is a sword on a pole. And lastly, there's the staff pole, a semi-flexible pole which can be strung to be used as a primitive longbow or a not-that-great quarter staff. I'm not talking about the throwing stick. It's a heavy stick that you throw. The end. You can use it to entertain the Lupin for hours on end, though. Headed to the Savage Coast, and you've got a ton of new weapons, starting with firearms, which you generally have two varieties, the arquebus, which is barely mentioned, and the wheel-lock pistol. These are mostly found in the Savage Baronies, as you need smoke powder to use these, and that's only found in regions with the Red Curse. The art is a bit all over the place for these guns, as many of them are depicted as later flintlocks. At short range, firearms ignore all armor, and even at longer ranges, they ignore a good chunk of it. They misfire 10% of the time, meaning the shot is wasted. Their dice also explode on an 8+. Roll 8 or higher and you get a bonus damage dice, which can also explode. Since smoke powder is magical, I treat all these weapons as +0 magic weapons, similar to the elf weapons. They are found mainly in the nation of Cimarron because they have deleterious effects on inheritors, so they're tightly controlled outside that nation. An inheritor trying to grab guns in Cimarron will get shot if he's lucky, or worse, get all of his Cinnabarrel ruined by the smoke powder effect by people just firing their guns into the ground around him. Then you get to the Kingdom of Belane, which is populated by a bunch of Cockney cats, tens of thousands of them lounging around talking like Michael Caine. So of course, the weapons mentioned in the chart for them are the Nonaka, the Sa, the Matara, and the Mishia, or nunchucks, sais, katanas, and wakazashis, because you can't have Rakasta without mentioning the Samurai Jungle Space Cats on the moon. The number of Miyashima Rakasta in Belane is in the single digits, but it still gave TSR an excuse to add Japanese weapons to a nation based on East London. Rakasta also have the Kasas, which are the inspiration for this video, which are the wrist blades like Shredder from TMNT. Treat them like short swords and you can't be disarmed. That was a rundown on some of the more obscure weapons in Mystara, from the magical demi-human weapons to a plethora of Nithian weapons, to the excuse to include Japanese weapons in the Savage Coast. First time I made this video, the file got corrupted as I was writing it. When I started over, I got the mother of all chest colds and didn't work for almost 2 weeks. Which explains my new OnlyFans, to try to catch up on all the work I've lost, because Patreon is for people ashamed of their bodies. But now I'm 3 weeks behind schedule, and it's time to play catch-up. Expect the video on marriage in the known world coming up very soon. But until then, remember, pedis inter quos non placet ludus.